time no see, everyone. Welcome to another Cartoon Galaxy rant, where I like to rant about cartoons. Man, I can't even remember the last time I did a Cartoon Galaxy rant video. Oh hell. Yeah, it's been a while. Well, today I want to talk about Rick and Morty. If you've seen my first video about it, link above if you haven't, I talked a lot about how the show felt as though it was losing its magic and the quality was declining. I feared it marked the end of a beloved franchise that I and many others grew to love from the many years it aired on Adult Swim. But after I finally finished watching the end of season 7, which I think was around January, was when I finished watching it, even though the season ended maybe a month before, I'm not too sure. I have to say that I was both surprised and relieved to see that the show is making a turnaround. And as much as I like to bitch about when cartoons look like crap, I do like to praise a cartoon series when it shows these kind of improvements, especially since nowadays it's so rare. Granted, it took a while for me to post this video. I know, but I really want to follow up from my last video, expressing the huge improvements I've noticed and how it's such a vast change from what the series was suffering from in the prior seasons. Now, before I go forward, I'm going to do the typical YouTube thing, and yes, that is to ask for you to please like and subscribe. It definitely helps the channel, and it is completely worth it, considering that I don't just post cartoon rants, but also I post a lot of cartoon-related content, like crossovers, spoofs, and drawing segments of cartoons we all love so much. Ain't that darling? Okay, now that I got that out of the way, let's
get on with it.
Yeah. Yep. Let's go. So, just a quick summary of what went wrong with Rick and Morty during the last few seasons that had aired prior to season 7. Now, this is just a quick summary. If you want the full-length synopsis, make sure to check my other Rick and Morty video that talks all about it. There are 4 factors I had stated that made the show really good when it first aired and how these elements were lacking in the last few seasons. These are the humor, story, world building, and character development. Rick and Morty always had an interesting sense of humor in that it combined adult humor with a lot of immature shenanigans. This also went hand in hand with the creative creatures and worlds that the show visited. However, the jokes always worked because they were sprinkled so perfectly within the show as little quips or random events. Some examples being the butter robot, whose only purpose is giving someone butter. It's not the central theme of the episode, but it's just random and silly, and you can't help but laugh at this robot's purpose and the existential crisis it has when it realizes its purpose. And there are a lot of random jokes that play out in a similar way. Yet in the last few seasons of Rick and Morty, the jokes weren't just little quips and events, they became the central theme of the episode. Not only this, but as Rick and Morty humor can also play on shock value, the newer seasons seem to amp that up to 11, where not only does the humor shock you, but it does so with really inappropriate and uncomfortable scenarios that make it really, and I mean really, hard to laugh at. Some involving indecent family relationships on not just 1, but 3 or more occasions. This obviously ties into flaws in the writing and storytelling. Rick and Morty's stories are always built by Harmon's story circle, but the trouble is that some episodes felt they steered away from this strategy and may have not been used at all or with little influence. Literally, look at the first episode of season 6. It felt all over the place, with too much being added all at once. Other episodes did the same, on top of trying to make itself look smart, with the too many science-y details that made the show harder to follow than game journalists trying to comprehend what a good game is. And if it's hard to follow certain details, it's far from enjoyable. Lastly, the characters. Some characters were less likable or changed in unfavorable ways, while others could have had more opportunities to grow or be used in amazing ways, but never were. A missed opportunity for character development. Two of these characters I personally felt were Morty and Space Beth. The relationship between Morty and his grandfather, season to season, seemed to be getting more and more severed, especially when further details of Rick's past get revealed. This would have been a great opportunity for Morty to grow a little more as a character, either segregating himself from his grandfather or maybe pushing back in greater fervor than he has. And Space Beth, well, it just felt like she was there. That's about it. Just there. She had no purpose in the show, which was really disappointing because she looks like such an amazing character that had potential. She was a character I actually wanted to know more about, but that never happened. And Rick, I didn't like so much where they were going with him either. When the show first aired, Rick was a genius scientist with a high level of arrogance and defiance towards authority. However, despite his brilliance, the arrogant side of him did make him prone to mistakes, allowing him to be something of a flawed character in some ways. In the later seasons, he appears to make less and less mistakes, and even comparing himself to something of a god on a multitude of occasions, making him less relatable and shrinking his ability to grow. All these were the big problems with the last few seasons, but after season 7, these factors seem to improve. How, you may ask? Well, let me explain. But before I do, just keep in mind that if you haven't watched season 7, there will be spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled, I recommend watching the season first and then come back. If you don't mind being spoiled, then you can continue watching this video. Okay, let's go. So first, I'd like to return to the humor. The humor seemed to steer back to its original methods, as was used in earlier seasons when the show first ran. Jokes were shocking and immature, but not so much that it was uncomfortable to watch or felt it took up the plot of the episode. One perfect example I could think of off the top of my head was the episode We Quat Amorticon Summer. I hope I pronounced that right. The adventure in this episode involves Summer and Morty, in which Summer gets points for an attribute slider and uses the slider to impress friends and people from her school, using it to make her look either smart or strong, whatever characteristic she wants to have to look admirable. Morty envies the fact that Rick gave Summer this device and not him, and fights Summer for the attribute slider, breaking it and causing the two siblings to literally merge together. Summer still looks like her normal self, but Morty is turned into a Kawato that's merged to her stomach. Summer is first repulsed by being merged in this way, but eventually finds a little niche of other people like her, that being with a Kawato merged to them, and she starts to blend in. However, she starts to trust the wrong person, this guy Kenneth, who's also merged to a Kawato, and because of Mr. Kenneth, her and Morty wind up being surgically removed, that being Morty surgically removed from Summer, and this is so Morty could be sold off to an interested customer who wants a Kawato of their own. It's up to Summer and Rick to get Morty back, which they do, and then this results in a ridiculous battle with Kenneth and his Kawato. Kenneth's Kawato actually jumps out of Kenneth, killing him. Then he jumps into this spider leg robot thing. This picture actually, for some reason, reminded me of the Krang from the Ninja Turtles for some reason. And then this results in an epic battle between Morty and Kenneth's Kawato. Epic and also hilariously ridiculous as you see two tiny deformed looking things fighting each other. Oh, and the Kawato just keeps sprouting another Kawato. And that Kawato sprouts another Kawato. Yeah, you know where I'm going with this. Eventually, they kill all the Kawatos, and Morty gets the spider leg robot thing from the evil Kawato. And leading to the end of the episode where Summer learns she has no need to impress others and is good with how she is, while Morty wreaks havoc with his new robot legs. Yep, the adventure was fun, the story was well put together, and just those little moments of silliness with Kawato battles felt like a real original Rick and Morty episode of the good old days. And that also shows us how the writing is back to normal, being fluid and following the Dan Harmon story wheel. Lastly, I want to get into the characters. The characters feel like where they need to be. Space Beth has appeared less actually, which although at first seems sucky, doesn't seem like a bad choice to me. Since she didn't play a role in anything and was just there in the prior seasons, it makes more sense to not have her present until she can have a stronger role in a later episode. So hopefully there's a promising future for her character as we get to other seasons. Morty is just back to being Morty. He still is able to hold his own, more so than he has in episode 1 and earlier seasons, but there hasn't been much more to that. I was happy to see, though, that Morty was back to being on more adventures with Rick. For some reason, in the previous episodes, Rick and Morty's adventures appeared to be often, they were always separate from each other. They weren't always together. So it was nice to see them together again. I think Rick is the one that got a lot of the improvement, though, in character development this season. In the episode Mort Ragnarok, Rick tries to defeat the Pope, but is constantly being killed, sent to Valhalla, resurrected, and then killed again. This certainly shifts away from his original persona of being almost godlike and undefeatable in previous seasons. He does have flaws, and he can be defeated. Another great example of this is the episode where Rick has to confront Rick Prime, perhaps one of the most insane fights I've witnessed so far. I mean, Rick was close to death. He even needs the help of evil Morty in this episode to reach his goal of getting to Rick Prime. However, I think the most interesting piece to this episode was the realization that even though Rick Prime had been defeated, it in no way made Rick feel any better. He did what he wanted to do, but it wasn't going to bring his wife back, and he basically makes it clear he feels unfulfilled despite finally eliminating Rick Prime. Which I think is pretty deep, because when you come to think of it, vengeance really doesn't mend a person's resentment or anger. That stuff will always remain, and it's up to the person to fix it within themselves. Now that's pretty good writing right there. There's another episode too, which also shows a great deal of good writing and does make you question things in life. I'm talking about the episode That's a Morty, in which people on a particular planet eat their dead because their insides turn into spaghetti when they die. As crazy as that sounds, that episode was brilliant. It really questions the idea of morality versus global industry. Morty sees it as immoral to eat dead people, which is completely understandable. But because the dead people in the episode make delicious spaghetti and start being sold as a food product in the market, if the spaghetti stops being sold, it will hurt the industry selling it. It takes the world to see the fulfilling life of a dying man to finally start being repulsed by the idea of eating dead people spaghetti, making everyone realize, according to Rick, that it's not about industry or morality. People just can't bear the complexities of life itself. When faced with it, it's too unbearable to handle. Last but not least, I also want to address the end of the last episode of Season 7, Fear No Mort. After Morty goes into a fear hole to see if he can outbeat it, and face all of his fears, he finds it a difficult task as he basically lives through all of his fears. However, he does finally make it out of the hole, confessing to Rick that he was able to see Rick's wife alive again in the hole. Rick and Morty leave the hole only to have Rick a few seconds later running back to it. And at first we assume that he's gonna go into the hole because he has the urge to see his wife again. However, we actually see him take a picture of Morty out of his pocket and put it on a bulletin board next to the hole, showing that Morty beat it. He overcame his fears. It's kind of gave me vibes of the episode with Mr. Jellybean some seasons ago. This last episode, just like that one, proves that as cold and uncaring as Rick can be to Morty, he does really, truly love his grandson. So, yeah, it's apparent that there have been big improvements in this newer season, but it leads to the question, why were there issues to begin with? As I mentioned in my prior video, I felt there may have been two main causes, that being poor work environment and writer fatigue. Dan Harmon had a reputation of being difficult in previous shows that he had worked on in the past. One of these in particular was the show Community. Also, there were rumors that some of the inappropriate elements in the older seasons of Rick and Morty may have come from Dan Harmon, as there was a controversy in which he created a short film where he had a gross relationship with a baby doll. I won't go into details. You could look it up if you dare, but this short film caused a lot of backlash, so much so that Dan Harmon had to make an apology online to assure he did not lose his job at Adult Swim. However, not too long after my Rick and Morty video, it was revealed that Justin Roiland was no saint either. He was tried for domestic battery and false imprisonment. It was after this that staff who worked with Justin, Dan included, came forward saying that working with him was a disaster. He rarely showed any involvement in the show except for doing voices, and when he was around, he acted inappropriately around staff. This doesn't surprise me though, since if you have seen Justin's original work before Rick and Morty, most specifically the show The Real Animated Adventures of Doc and Marty, which Rick and Morty was based off of, you'd see he does have a knack for really gross and uncomfortable jokes. For a series of short animations, that's all fine and dandy, but maybe acting or saying similar things around your staff, yeah, that can result in a hostile and unpleasant work environment. Staff even lobbied together to get Justin removed from at least voice acting his characters. However, companies like Adult Swim took things a step further and got rid of him outright. So yeah, Justin had been removed from all of his works, voice work and all. In fact, in season 7, 2 new voice actors were hired to do the voices of Rick and Morty, and I have to say, they're actually really good. I would never have even known Justin Roiland was replaced with how dead on they were with the voices. Although one thing with Rick is that he can't really reach those high-pitched cadences anymore, like, Justin would. But in my opinion, the voice is still perfect. Regardless of what some critics have said, it's still really, really good. Hats off to the voice actors and the people who selected them. Well done. So yeah, it does seem that with Justin Roiland out, things have been better. He may have in fact been the main cause of stress in the workplace, and with this stress, the products, that being the episodes, were just not, good anymore. Now with him out of the picture, the stress is gone and everyone can get the creative juices flowing again. Also, I'm glad to see that Rick and Morty is also taking a hiatus until 2025. If you might remember from my first video, I know I keep mentioning my first video, but I did mention that when Rick and Morty first aired on Adult Swim, we actually wouldn't see a new episode until years after. When the show got approved for more seasons, is when we finally did get year after year releases. And this could have in fact resulted in that creative fatigue that I was talking about earlier. With a hiatus, this does give our writers and creators some time to refuel before coming up with new ideas for the next season. Which, by the way, I can now officially say I really look forward to watching. It was such a delight to see how well put together season 7 is. And if you have not in fact watched it yet, I highly recommend you do. It was wonderful. I loved it. Looking forward to season 8. Anywho, I'm going to end my ranting there. I hope you enjoyed my commentary. If you watch season 7, let me know what you guys think. Or if you have already watched it, let me know what you guys think. I always love hearing your takes in the comments. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next video, whenever that may be. Take care and peace out.